Okay, everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Our normal bi-weekly Wednesday Asks in Praxis session. As usual, your devoted team is here, and we all bring different points of view. We are very fortunate to have a guest today who's expert on the topic of the day. So I'll introduce Sadie Van Buren, who's going to be joining us to talk a little bit about a maturity model that we've worked with her on developing and propagating in the community docs, the open source community docs, a little bit about what it is, what it does. Actually, I'll take you right to the intro or the agenda. Very journalistic here, right? The what, the why, the who, the how, the when, the what. So we're going to talk about what it is and why it would be of interest to you. We'll talk a bit about who's working on it, how updates get published, when it can be used, and where and how to work with it, and some resources for following up with us, and the creators of the model, the stewards, I should say, probably, right? It's more of a stewardship model because we're putting it out there for community use. We'll all be stewards eventually. So I'm gonna let us jump right into the what is, and Sadie, I think this is where you speak. So you were the OG of the maturity model, or in its first incarnation. So maybe talk us through the history of the mission, if you would.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. So to give you all some context about the model, let's go 1 decade back. I'd been working as a SharePoint consultant for a few years at that time, primarily building intranets and extranets, and I was seeing common themes among my clients. Most of them thought that the challenges that they were experiencing were unique to them, but in reality, most of them were on a very similar journey. So I created the SharePoint maturity model to help them understand that journey. I based it on the capability maturity model, which had been out there at that time, and also on Microsoft's breakdown of the different areas of SharePoint as they existed then, which many of us fondly remember as the SharePoint pie. So I used that model with my clients, and after a few years with Julie's help, developed an app that anyone could use to evaluate their own SharePoint maturity and kind of get a report back about how they were doing. And over the years, Mark urged me to update the model first for Office 365 and then for Microsoft 365. And now, 10 years later, a few of us have come together to do that. So the mission of the model, as we're developing it today, is primarily to help end users get a holistic sense of the platform, how to best use it to get their work done, and for organizations to get the most out of their investment. The secondary mission or reason is really to give the global community of practitioners, like the folks at Simpraxis, a common way to talk about the platform and to support their clients on their journey. And then finally, the third piece is to create an open source version that can be continually updated and improved, which is so critical as the pace of technology change and service releases is always increasing. Next.
So when we dive in and look at why are we working on this now, one of the top points is around that Microsoft 365 is a pretty confusing landscape. There's a whole suite of tools and lots of conversations around what to use when. And when we talk about it in that way, we're really focusing on the technology, but the best approach to help drive your adoption and usage is to really focus on your outcome objectives. So the competencies in the SharePoint maturity model help you think about those objectives with clear impacts for each level. So if you know, for example, that you need to increase your staff in training because you are launching Microsoft 365 for the first time, you can look through the model and see the different impacts and see where you want to be hitting in your organization. Very often, an IT professional might inherit this platform or be voluntold that they're now taking on Microsoft 365 with no background. So having this framework, which can provide an outline of what is possible and where you may want to begin. As Sadie mentioned as well, many Microsoft customers are on the same journey. So compiling our experiences to develop this community-based framework really supports us all. So as they say, rising tide lifts all boats. So we can all see how we can help push this technology further to support our organizations together. When it comes to some different ways that you can use it, before joining Simpraxis, I was a platform owner for Microsoft 365, and I was fortunate to be there from the day that they launched and help build our roadmap over the subsequent years. There was a lot of work around tying what we did and what we worked on to the company goals, but a lot of the education that I need to do with my stakeholders was around what's actually possible. So using this model to socialize in the organization that it's not just what I'm saying is possible in the platform, but here's what the whole community agrees on, and something that they can use as a source of reference can help support anything that we're trying to promote or get budget for. Maybe we want to advance some of our communication, and we're really trying to talk about using SharePoint News and keeping all of our content central within SharePoint, showing where that is on the maturity model compared to where we are, and those impacts can help make that argument for me. And then now as a consultant, very often we have customers or clients who are brand new to launching Microsoft 365, and they kind of don't know where they want to begin. Of course, again, we talk about those outcome objectives, but it's a great resource for any of our clients or customers to take a look at and say, well, where is our organization and where do we want to be? And they can start to self-select and really dive into that content. And lastly, a lot of it's inspiration. I'd say working on this project with everybody, it's been really interesting because we each have different strengths areas in the competencies. So we're working on search right now and learning about some of the different things that maybe you didn't know about, because it's really challenging to be an expert in every single competency and every single solution in Microsoft 365. So knowing that some of these other areas, you might need a little bit more support.
I'd go so far as to say you're never going to be an expert in all of the areas.
Oh,
And
Lord.
if someone says they
fair.
are, they're just not.
It's a red blood flag if somebody claims to be.
Yeah.
We used to distrust people who said they were SharePoint experts, and now Microsoft 365 is so much bigger than that. So,
Yeah, the
Just saying.
story I like to tell is I knew almost everything about SharePoint 2003 and 2007. I knew a lot about 2010. After that, no, I knew my corner just got too big.
Shall we go to the next? Let's talk a little bit about who's doing all this work.
Sure, absolutely. And I can jump in here. That's okay. So with regard to this initial effort that we're doing now, Mark was really the driving force that kind of motivated us to get together and work on this. So he pulled Emily and I together, and we started to kind of go through the levels and make revisions and figure out what should change and what should stay the same. And then we had some enthusiastic participation from Simon Doy and Simon Hudson in the community, who reached out and wanted to be involved. So this has been the effort so far, but really the key thing to take away is that we need everyone in the community to be reviewing, commenting, suggesting, providing feedback, asking questions, poking holes. I mean, this is a community effort, and we really, really want a lot of participation to make this thing great.
What about when?
So as Sadie pointed out, this effort started 10 years ago. So right now we're working on updating the different competencies. So along the left, you can see we have 4 of those available now in Microsoft Community Docs. Coming soon are all of the ones on the right, and we are working towards having all the competencies published by the end of October. But it's really important to call out this is an ongoing and iterative process. A lot has changed in SharePoint in the past 10 years. A lot will continue to change. So as the technology advances, we'll keep working on this model and making sure we're updating it with that.
So should we take a look?
Yes, let's do. And I guess I just put the link in the chat to the one of the representative competencies. So
Do you want to take over sharing, Sadie? Do you have it up, or do you want me to do that?
either way, I'm happy to. Let's see, I can take over.
Must hit allow.
now we're in trouble.
Well, I actually would maybe say the opposite.
Now we're in better shape.
Just
I think it's
teasing you.
very appropriate that of all of the people on this call, Sadie's the one that deals with the maturity thing, because I think for many of us,
Yeah, it's a
There's a-
challenge.
Yeah.
when I first heard about this, I'm like, the maturity model, that is clearly not my wheelhouse.
Sadie, I'm going to stop
Maturity model.
sharing.
We could start that.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Anybody have any questions while we sort the screen share?
Here, Sadie, you want to share and take over, or do you want me to pop into that link and do it?
I am not convinced that I have. Yep, can't. Not a presenter or organizer. So either way,
Yeah,
what's fastest?
You took over my sharing.
Mike, go for it. Just
I
click
got it. Yeah,
Sadie's-
I'm pasting it in, and I'll share it back out in a moment.
It's technology stuff, man. It's hard.
Yeah, I think I don't have, you're in as a guest, so I think I don't have it set so that guests can present. That's probably why.
She
I
shows
just-
up as a presenter in my.
I just added her as a presenter,
Yep,
No
thank
problem.
you.
but too late now.
No problem. Coming at you.
Eric,
No,
you
it's
fix
fine.
it.
It's fine. So this is an example of one of the competencies, and we'll provide everybody with the location of all these articles in just a moment. So for each one, we're going to present a very similar set of information, a main overview of the competency, how it's defined, the typical aspects of the Microsoft 365 platform that sort of underlie this competency. And there's going to be a lot of overlap there because many of them do, more than one thing. So they might do collaboration in this case, but also communication. We'll talk about how the competency evolved over time, and then go through each one of the levels. So starting at level 100, it's important to note the framework does not start at 0, right? Nobody wants to think of themselves as a 0 in terms of capability. So we started at level 100. And we'll go through each one of the levels and provide some of the typical markers that you'll see along the way, right? So it's not necessarily comprehensive, but it gives you sort of a sketch and a framework for where folks might be as they're making their way along the maturity. So level 100, what are the things you'll typically see, and what are the impacts of being at this level? How are people in the organization experiencing this part of the platform at this lower level and then at higher levels? And just to note, like any sort of maturity model with capability, 100 sort of your starting point where you're just starting out and things are very sort of unstructured and ungoverned and undefined. And then by the time you get up to 500, you're really managing and implementing in a very standard way across the organization. Governance is applied, continuous improvement is applied, feedback and iteration are applied. So, to go meta for a second, we are definitely trying to get to level 500 maturity with this maturity model, taking your feedback into consideration and making continuous updates as we go.
And Sadie, in summary, the 100 through 500 level are kind of like ad hoc, repeatable, defined. What are the next three or the next couple? Managed.
Yeah, actually,
then,
if you click on the introduction, you'll see those levels sort of broken out.
it's a really good shorthand. I really like the way you guys you built it, the model. Yeah, initial, repeatable, defined, managed, optimizing.
And these are typical of maturity models, right? Like we did not invent these levels.
Yeah, that's right out of CMM, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And one thing to note as well, right? All organizations may not need to get to 500 maturity on each of these areas. So while there are these levels, still keep your company goals, culture, outcome objectives in mind. 300 might be the maximum capability that you need.
Yeah, and it's not bad if that's the case. I mean, what this is really designed to do is give you a way to think about where you are and where you want to go. And deciding that you want to be at level 200 on something is not a bad thing if it's a conscious decision. If you're at level 100 and you don't want to be there and you don't do anything about it, that's a conscious decision. And that may not be such a great idea. So I think the next slide is me, but before you switch back to the slides, Mike, could you just go to the home page of this repo just to show where we are? No, you already went.
Oh, here you go.
Okay, yeah, just go to the home page. So right now, the maturity model, you'll see that card that's on the far right of the screen is where these articles live. So we've got an area carved out inside the Microsoft 365 community content effort to house the maturity model. So this is just a piece of what's going on in there. Now you can flip back to the slides.
Anything else, Mark, regarding broader content that you'd want to highlight around the community content?
Actually, thanks for asking. So one of the things we're finding is that as we're building out the maturity model articles, we're also realizing that there should be some other content in here that sort of supports it. So for example, that effective communication block that's below the maturity model, those articles, or at least the first one, came out of talking through communication. So the principles of communication is something that Simon Hudson wrote up because it was too big to fit into the communications article around the competency, but it's an important set of things to think about as an organization, how you communicate to your constituents. So you'll find that as you go through those maturity model competencies, there are links to some of these other documents because we're sort of expanding the concepts in here as well. So if there's anything that you as a viewer think that you want to contribute, if it's not necessarily right about the competency, but maybe something that's adjunct to that, that's also a great thing to think about doing.
We have a question in the chat. So Jason Miller asked, does the model discuss where information protection and data loss prevention features fall in the discussion?
Yep, I can take that one. Great question, Jason. So for sure, the model is going to incorporate those kinds of security considerations. Security, the topic has become much more in focus in the decades since this model was created, and also the tools have evolved tremendously to support a much higher degree of security than we had 10 years ago. So these are places where the security topics do need to be worked into the model, and we are going to focus there.
Yeah, we actually just expanded our list of coming soon competencies yesterday or the day before. I forget the last time we talked, to talk about content management in the sense of in a very broad sense, not maybe the historical view of it, but more like what is the content life cycle? How do you think about the inception of an idea becoming a document, becoming a list, becoming something that has a retention policy applied to it versus just sort of letting everything sit like most people do all the time. So content management itself has a broader application than it used to because of some of the capabilities you're asking about, Jason.
And for Jason, if you didn't see it, in the community docs, there's some non-maturity model security content already built into this that I would expect we'll see more of in the future as we do some maturity model specific components, but I think there's also a lot of room to build here as well.
Right. So if there's something specific, Jason, that you think is missing, please get into the repo and give us an article suggestion, or at whatever level you think would be useful. I mean, we're happy to take that kind of feedback.
Yeah, that was news to me as someone who recently went through the learning and how to be a contributor to community docs and just getting a little more familiar with GitHub, et cetera. The fact that people who have ideas for articles are almost as valuable as the people willing to write articles, right? Because like we need to know where the demand is coming from and what this should look like. So if you've got ideas for content, it doesn't mean you're on the hook to author it. We'd love that, but recommend, ask, propose, suppose.
And just without getting too sidetracked, if you scroll all the way up to the top, Mike, there's an edit link at the top of every one of these pages, and if you click on that, that'll take you into the repo where we actually store the content that feeds all of this, and you can see the issues. It's in GitHub, and you can see the issues there where you can make an article suggestion, point out an error, whatever it is. Up there on the top left, just see issues. So hopefully this isn't too intimidating. It's something that you can sort of step through and definitely give us your 2 cents or 5 cents or an entire $1 if you have it. All right, Mike, back to the slides or we'll never finish the rest of the stuff we want to say. Cool. So where can you find it? We were just there. So again, part of the Microsoft 365 community docs. Just one more thing about that. This is real estate that we've carved out, and Microsoft is giving us the space in their docs.microsoft.com realm, which is a pretty big deal. It took a while for that sort of conversation to get to the point where it was okay for us to start putting this community-based content in there. I think it's going really well. I think this effort is a big piece of that going well. So I'm psyched about it. If you want to know more about what's going on, how things are changing, what we're publishing, tweet at us. That M365 Maturity is a Twitter handle that you can follow and let us know what you think. The broader repository, the Microsoft 365 Community Docs, also has a Twitter handle, and it's going to obviously be talking more about the other articles in addition to the maturity model. But if you wanted to follow those, you can keep track of what's going on. Well, this is me again. So as a group, we decided to sort of make this a small group effort to bring the first iteration to the fore, sort of thinking through the framework and how do we apply it to the way Microsoft 365 works today, and just sort of the general laying down the foundation we felt would be better done as a group. But we absolutely want that feedback. So there are a couple things that you can participate in to sort of walk in that door and start going on the ride with us. There are these PNP sharing is caring sessions that will help you. If you saw when Mike clicked on edit and we landed in GitHub, if that looked like a scary place to be, those first-time contributor sessions and the community docs sessions are all about making that not feel like a scary place. The first-time contributor is just sort of generally how do you use GitHub and how can you contribute to a repo there in general. Most people use GitHub for code, but we're using it here for text content. And it works actually very well for that because we get the version control and all the stuff that we need to keep an integrity around the repo. And then there's a separate session that the Sharing is Caring guys do, David Warner and Hugo Bernier, focused entirely on the community docs. So again, the maturity model lives there. So if you wanted to contribute, that would be the way to find out how the mechanics of that work.
And as someone who just went through both of those, they're fantastic. They're world-class, hands-on, learn as you go, do exercises. You will have contributed to the repo by the end of the session. It's really good.
Good question.
So where are we taking it? Oh, Shelley, yeah. Well, let's get Shelley's question.
Maybe that's one for Sadie. You want me to read it to you, Sadie?
Sure, no, I can read it. Different stakeholders and roles will score the maturity model differently. For example, CIO, tenant admin, IA, each see the world through their own lens. Have you found it makes a difference if they can score independently and then come together to discuss or work on the model collaboratively? I understand this will be influenced by the relationships of the folks involved. Yep, great question, Shelley, and totally understood. I mean, I think there's value in both ways, right? I will say when I used to run these assessments, I did like to get everybody in the room together and kind of run through the model collaboratively. And people actually, it was usually a really great conversation and a lot of fun too, especially when people got competitive about where they were. So I think there's value, but there's value in either, right? You might get more of a real unvarnished assessment if you ran them separately. So I guess I would say I would leave this up to the practitioner who's running this or to the organization, what you think makes the most sense. If it's too political to have everyone in the room, maybe you do it individually and then kind of normalize or rationalize the results when you come together.
I love the idea, Sadie. Just throw them all in a room, Thunderdome style, blood on the walls. Make them fight it out.
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, I think, it's really good if you could have like t-shirts made in advance and stuff. So to get everybody in that, we're all on the same team feeling, but yeah, no, those were good times. So yeah, to think about what's coming, right? So for sure, we're going to finish up those remaining competencies and publish them out, right? Get the first drafts out there. We want to put together some nice matrix views to make it a little bit more easy to digest, because it would be hard, I think, to run these assessments going through the articles as they are, right? So let's get you some nice matrix views that you can go through them, in a more digestible way. And then we're going to make updates from the feedback and the comments that are going to come in from the community. And then, considering having some sort of data collection way, as we had years ago, that could let anybody around the world kind of do a self-assessment, submit their data, get their report on their maturity level, and then contribute to that kind of database for everyone to eventually be able to do some benchmarking. So if I'm a company at this size with this many employees, and I have this SharePoint version, in this industry, where are others like me in their maturity journey? And then also we're considering some multilingual versions of the model, which I believe, Mike, you have signed up to create for us.
Oh, sure. Yes, of course.
Because he speaks all those languages.
I see the
just moi.
version is not too far away.
We are, of
Klingon.
course, going to
Klingon.
accept feedback and suggestions about what else would be good to add to the model as well. So there's that meta level, right? Like, please contribute to the content, but also if there are things that you think would make the model better, we'd love to hear about that too.
Awesome. In our remaining, got a couple minutes left. I know we've gone through a lot of resources today. We've got links to all of them here. Anything that we want to highlight, Sadie or Mark, on this? Takeaways?
I think those are all the links that we just talked about, and some of which we showed you. So I don't think there's anything additional here.
Okay, nothing to underscore. A quick an administrative note: we will not do this in 2 weeks because Microsoft's Ignite conference will be going on at that time. But when we are back in 4 weeks, we're going to focus on that content. So if you're unable to make Ignite, or if you just want to talk about what you learned and hear about what we learned, compare notes, sound things out, big old Microsoft Ignite recap on the 7th of October.
Let's also make sure we point out that if you have any questions or topic ideas for Ask in Praxis, please feel free to go to that link there, the SIMPinfo Ask in Praxis link, and submit those ideas. We review those pretty regularly and do try to make our agenda based on that feedback.
If that's it, I want to thank our guest Sadie for joining us today and her contributions to this model, as well as Mark, Emily, and in absentia, I think the Simons, who've done a great job with content so far. Hopefully some of the folks on this call can help contribute in the future. Shelley, I know what a great writer you are. We will draft you at some point for that. And thanks everybody for taking the time. We very much appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.